Dear colleagues, good students, friends. This presentation will come to you through the digital networks, as supposedly I am during the workshop week on an expedition on the peninsula of Peloponnesus, looking at the old ruins of ancient Greek architecture. Therefore, this presentation is here now recorded, and I hope your workshop week would be really fruitful. I am quite honored to start the presentations, keynotes, and my presentation really is about digital reality. It has been called digital, both disturbing and delightful. So digital, disturbing, delight. The first image comes to us as a title image of this presentation from Rome, the Campidoglio hill, where 1546 Michelangelo was refurbishing the city government of Rome. And he used there two statues. Both of them came from Vatican, the stores of the Pope. And the title image is supposedly the river Nile, the river god Nile. And it was probably made sometime between 100 and 200 years AD. And so in the 16th century, Michelangelo gave to it a new life. The title image I have been using because it is so contemporary and so very ancient at the same time. It's close to 2,000 years old now, and my grandsons, they were sure that the god, was holding in his hand a smart tablet or a smartphone, and I might add that it is not only the smartphone, but if we look more closely, we can see that there is a mobile 3D printer in his left hand. So it is the cornucopia that we all know, presented by omnipotent Greek god Zeus to the she-goat, which was nurturing him when he was still infant, and quite unexpectedly broke the horn of the goat. So cornucopia then was a present from omnipotent God to the goat, and it could make anything appear through that beautiful horn of plenty. So it is actually a printer. Especially in the cultures where the telephone has still a lead, this statue is very contemporary. I think the digital reality has transformed the way we look at the world, it has transformed the way how we perceive the world, and it has changed the world itself. Marshall McLuhan, already in the 60s, was saying that one technology extends one of our senses, a new translation of culture occurs as swiftly as the new technology is interiorized. And this is true. Now there are only people of my age who still remember the digital age, what happened before it. And every day today, the digital reality has been embedded in all our life, in all our things, in all our implements, in all our everyday work, that we can't recognize that it is there. And Marshall McLuhan continued, the increase of visual stress among the Greek alienated them from the primitive art that the electronic age now reinvents after interiorizing the unified field of electric all-at-onceness. What a beautiful world of electric all-at-onceness. Nobody remember that time, or couldn't even understand what online means, which actually has been described here as a unified field of electric all at onceness. And this unified field has become everyday part of our life. And in this presentation, I would like to look at 4 questions. How can we think of digital reality? Can we describe digital reality? How we can see digital reality? And for this particular workshop, how can we use the digital reality? So let us start thinking of digital reality. Here is an image by Luca Bruno. It's made in 2005 and it is the inauguration of the Pope. And we can see people witnessing the event, and there is only 1 or 2 telephones that are used to make pictures. Here is another image by Michael Sohn, 2013, and the image is totally different. I think some of you may have seen these 2 images closely together in internet. They are quite popular. And here they are, 2005 and 2013. We must conclude that something very important has really happened between these dates. When the first image from 2005 gives the impression of communion of people, people gathering together to witness an event. The existential quality of that image certainly is about I'm here to see. I am as much as I am here. And in this particular place and time, these people all collectively have witnessed the event. This communion is as old as mankind. People come together, they do their offerings or celebrate, or later on in the field of democracy come and choose the leaders. And it is the most existential way of being there. 2013, a profound change has happened. The people are there not to witness the event, but the witnessing part is done by the technological miracle of smartphones and smart tablets. I am there to make the image, and I validate myself through the image. So I think it is a profoundly different communion than before. I am as much as I have done the image and uploaded it to my friends. So between 2005 and 2013, such a fantastic change has happened. Now if we look at the Statista, some diagrams, which is quite a good firm to look at when you're interested in visualization of data, we see that here also profound changes have taken place between 2006 and 2016. When 2006 we see at least 3 big oil companies, ExxonMobil, British Petroleum, Royal Dutch Shell. Then in 2016 only ExxonMobil has remained there as the world's most valuable public company. But it goes further. If we look at 2018, we see that all the tech firms, IT tech firms, Alphabet, Facebook, Amazon, they have been doing very well. So there is a change between moving from oil-based economy to IT-based economy. It also is a clear change between first, second technological revolution and the third technological revolution that really has taken IT and communications as its most wonderful priority. But if we look further, we can see that since 2018 the tech companies have really flourished. This is to 2021, and we can see that Amazon has nearly tripled its market capitalization. Alphabet is doing fine, nearly 2 times as much, and Facebook isn't doing bad either. So the pandemic really has boosted these new technologies, new industries that are certainly already from the last technological revolution, the technological revolution of IT tech. If we look at the development from 2006 to 2020, we can see that the tech companies, IT tech companies, have taken the dominant role in it. And here and there, huge investment companies pop up, but it is mostly the IT tech, as we can see, 2020. I was also looking at if we think that profound changes have happened and the paradigm is changing, and one of these clear indications of this paradigm change is the images. So when did the mass apparatus for image making and image transforming and image sending really happened? And for that I looked at iPhone sales, and I was quite surprised to find out that 2007, 0 iPhones were sold. iPhone looks, and other smartphones of course, look so familiar, and we have interiorized them, as Marshall McLuhan has said, that we really can't remember how long we have been using them. But here we can also see this change of events between 2005 and 2016, the plateau or the stability of iPhone sales has arrived between 13 and 14. If we go further, we can also look at Apple Mac. I have decided to use these because they seem to be ahead of development in technology. Then the changeover plateau here has arrived between 11 and 12, but of course Apple Mac has been available for much longer time. So these sales definitely show us that it is exactly this very moment these two images capture where a powerful change in human history has happened. In 2014, The Economist published an article about the third great wave. It is about the third technological revolution, and they have a very good illustration here. They very well summarize up the first, second and third technological revolutions already predicted by American scientist Daniel Bell in 1987. His first articles came out about the third technological revolution, and I must say he was very good in predicting where we have arrived by 2020. But this illustration is quite interesting also from another point of view. Here we can see the British and US average annual change of GDP per person. So it is not absolute value of the GDP, which probably has been advancing all the time, but it is the speed of changing it. And it really shows how all of these three technological revolutions have hindered the speed of change in GDP. And this is like Thomas Kuhn is saying that when a new paradigm arrives, there is a certain time for retooling. People, scientists, businessmen, they take over the new methods, the new implementations, and it takes time, and it is called retooling. And we can see that in all three cases, actually, the speed has been hindered. So we might say, as the Economist article tells us, a third great wave of invention and economic disruption set off by advances in computing and information and communication technologies in the late 20th century promised to deliver a similar mixture of social stress and economic transformation. And they also add that it is really driven by a handful of technologies: machine intelligence, advanced autonomous robotics, and so on. In 2014, it was also said that the last-minute advancement in technological revolution has really been due to the, not so much due to the power and speed of computing, but because of the more advanced algorithms. So we might say that in 30 years it has totally changed the information, communication, entertainment and surveillance technologies, both in the form as well as in their content, what we witness today since 30 years ago. And this can be called digital reality. And I think it is totally new reality and it is totally new paradigm. We really do not know how this paradigm can be described yet, because it is in the emergent state. But one can already be sure that it has its own substance, substantiality, it has its own structure, and I would even add it has its own will, a kind of anthropomorphic will to power, which is not governed by any collectives or even individuals within the system of digital reality. If we try to describe it, we might say it consists of informal and communicative informational networks, complex hierarchy of computational algorithms, and the meaning system of its projections on screens, simply sometimes called the content. It is fueled by formal and informal online users, all of us. It is visible through multiple public and personal screens, and it is dominated by digital production giants, like we saw, the most capitalized public companies in the world: Amazon, Alphabet, Google and Facebook. The digital reality with its possibilities has even shaken the political and public institutions, and most oftenly in the modernist liberal democracies. The modernistic notions like labor, market, price, value, all of these are put under a question mark. And one can speculate that we have arrived at the collapse of the paradigm called modernism and its final stage called postmodernism. For design-based disciplines, I think it is important to notice that image on the screen has become the favorite access device for the digital reality. We might say that even in most simplistic form, it obtains already the 4 dimensions of space-time continuum. Even the pure text in front of us on the screen has up and down, left and right, front and back, as well as temporal duration, as long as we look at it, or in the form of the moving image. And it can be called the imagospheric condition of present culture, I think, because we are surrounded by images. We are surrounded by images which bombard us from all sides, from all the instruments we use, and they surround us like ordinary atmosphere which we breathe and where we live. So imagospheric condition is a kind of metaphoric description of the present situation. And I think it is also the indication of the interiorizing of digital reality to our everyday life in full capacity. When we look at the screens, there is another important element to describe. When it used to be that I owned a computer or a phone or a camera, they were separate instruments. Today, these separate instruments still partly exist as instruments, but at the same time they are the terminals to the digital reality that has its own structure, and I will be, whenever using these instruments, part of that structure. Sometimes it's governed by my user name and password, sometimes it's open. I never know what happens to my computer because it is updated, it updates itself, it brings in new software. What happens in the cloud where my documents are stored, I really don't know. So we are facing a kind of rather complex black box with the terminals of visual screens that we use to communicate with this world back there, behind the screen. It is like the behind the looking glass, I would say. Here is a story from The Guardian where the heading says, "Teen's tweets from her smart fridge go viral after mother confiscates her phone." So a girl is grounded and she's using her fridge to communicate, which also brings us to the Internet of Things, where all kinds of implements, whatever we can imagine, can communicate with the rest of the world. It later appeared that the story is fake, but nevertheless, we can all imagine that this is a very near future where this can really happen. For design-based professions, three major changes have happened, I think. And they tell us that there is a large paradigm for architecture and other design-based disciplines that is changing today. Because most of these elements that we have been used to of pre-digital age were started around Renaissance. The representational system of architectural design and images started by Brunelleschi and Alberti. The authorship of or isolation of an architect as the designer, the personality of designing, was started also by Alberti. The means of production, they are probably older. But all of these three, I think, are today changing. And that means for the design-based professions, this paradigm is also changing. The representational system of design has all transformed into the instruments of digital reality. The old-fashioned plans, elevations and sections are already a unified, merged system of digital object. The authorship or isolation of architect is suddenly feeling quite clear, and where the authorship ends and where the open access information starts, the border is very, very unclear. And also the means of producing architecture has changed. When so far from the beginning of times we have been using the subtracting technologies, then now we are using additive technologies. Before we had to take things away from the object to make it work as a piece of architecture or a piece of design. Today we only add, and of course that makes it much more sustainable. But all these three, I think, show us clearly that we are going through a major change of paradigm. Mario Carpo, in his two books, the first one, The Alphabet and the Algorithm, I think has really clearly indicated what is happening to the authorship today. Let me read. As digital fabrication processes invite endless design variations and promise to deliver them at no extra cost, the question inevitably arises as to who is going to design them all. In a parametric design process, some parameters are by definition variable. This variability may be automated and machine controlled. For example, a program may be instructed to generate any number of variations, randomly or as a function of some external factor. Alternatively, the designer may choose and fix all parameters that determine each individual item right from the start, thus authorizing only a given number of them, a closed series of different objects, and all designed by the same author. But a third possibility cannot be ruled out. Some parameters may be chosen at some point by someone other than the original author, and possibly without his or her consent. End of quotation. So we see that the methods of designing, digital designing, are already changing these fundamental laws of both architectural representation and architectural authorship that have been valid for 600 years. And Mario Carpo continues. We have reason to worry about and possibly lament the forthcoming demise of traditional architectural authorship. The recent spasms of authorial consent, always indelible part of the architect's trade, but recently risen to unprecedented levels, further reinforce the perception of an incipient crisis. Evidently, even among practitioners less inclined to theoretical speculation, the nagging feeling that something today is not quite right with architectural authorship has made some headway. So we clearly see that the architectural object, as known for 600 years, clearly changes. And Mario Carpo with Bernard Cash and Deleuze brings forward a new name for it. It is the objectile. Objectile is not an object but an algorithm, a parametric function which may determine an infinite variety of objects, all different, yet all very similar. The architecture becomes a kind of essence, a kind of mutable, a kind of transformable essence, all different but yet similar, in the form of new digital objects, objectiles. In the second book, Mario Carpo is already referring to the events that have happened after 2014. And he calls it the second digital turn. And here he is advocating a new method, which can be called brutal computing. He is referring to the fact that now the computing power of possibly reachable for us has become so big that the whole technology and the whole methods of digital calculations will change. He says, true, computer scientists largely agree that the novel, often truly astounding technical performance of today's computational tools is the main reason for many recent breakthroughs in AI. Yet today, dataism is more than a linear accretion of information and processing power, what some computer scientists call somewhat dismissively brute force computing, is in fact a new set of problem-solving methods, hence a new kind of science, triggered by today's unprecedented data affluence and computing speed. And what he calls the brutal calculation I have witnessed myself doing crosswords in the digital newspapers or in crossword sites. And when looking for synonyms, you suddenly find that there is a website or a web page where there are crossword clues. So instead of looking at a complex algorithm which could find you a synonym of somewhat twisted crossword explanation, there is an algorithm in Google that will look through all the possible crosswords ever put on digital sphere, and it will give you there are maybe 3 or 4 solutions to that particular hint, and it also gives you where these words have been used in crosswords. So the brutal calculation really, due to its new quality that comes out of its power, operates differently. And of course, this raw computing power brings us closer to artificial intelligence and quantum computing. Quantum computing, of course, could go very much further. And this is what has been written in Harvard Business Review 2020. We may now be on the brink of a second quantum revolution as we attempt to harness even more of the power of quantum world. Quantum computing and quantum communication could impact many sectors, including healthcare, energy, finance, security, and entertainment. Recent studies predict a multi-billion-dollar quantum industry quite soon. This is already today possible. With generative design, you can effectively rent 50,000 computers in the cloud for an hour. That means you can do things you never could have done before. You can do 50,000 days of engineering in one day. That is in CAD works, of course, is possible already today, but with quantum computing, anybody can probably do that on their computers. This is the UBS Bank recommendation. And when we look at it, we can see that factory automation, process automation, industrial software, they are already outdated. They are not growing as fast as new markets in 3D printing, artificial intelligence and drones. Here we can see that they predict 50% of rise. And artificial intelligence, of course, is probably the most important one of them. In this bank report also we can see the very neat and clear understanding what artificial intelligence could be. And it predicts that artificial superintelligence, ACI, which could be reached somewhere between 2050, is already something that surpasses human intelligence. But that is a gone boat. Already today, DeepMind, with a specific name AlphaFold, has been looking at how the proteins are folding, because the folding of the proteins then will really generate what these proteins will do. It hasn't been able, people have not been able to decipher it beforehand. And here this AlphaFold has already managed to do it. And in the report, which each of you can read actually, you will find that when then asked how the program reached to these results, it arrogantly says, I was looking at the profound work of some of the research groups, and then I merged it together. So it actually has happened where artificial intelligence has already reached the possibilities human mind has not yet. This is quantum computing growth by Statista. We can see Intel, Google and Rigetti. They say that probably Rigetti will be bought up by Google, and the Rigetti machine then will be the most advanced quantum powered computer. This is David Avshalom, and he is from University of Chicago. He figures that current state of quantum information research is roughly equivalent to 1950s era classical computers with few dozen transistors. But he points out that the equivalent quantum machines, those with a few dozen qubits, scale in a way that is highly non-linear. By the time someone invents a quantum computer with around 200 qubits, we will be able to process algorithms with more states than there are atoms in the observable universe. Okay, so we could ask, how can we describe digital reality? And from the viewpoint of empirical research, I have found 6 different possibilities to describe what has happened in this process of changing the paradigm. Firstly, it's the plenitude of information. Plenitude of information in the digital realities deals with an infinite abundance. Information can create, interpret, mutate and copy itself limitlessly. And down here are numbers from 2018, where it was believed that mankind between 1874 and 2021 can produce 3 million moving images, whereas in 2020 we already know that there are at least 7.5 million moving images. So it just grows infinitely. Secondly, digital platform has transformed documents, fiction, advertising, news into a unified field, undermining the public broadcasting and printed media. The previous typologies of genres has disappeared or merged. As a start, the public and private divisions in politics, culture and space disappear, and after that we know that the reality and fiction have become amalgamated together as well. So we can witness a strong amalgamation of public and private, but also reality and fiction. Current stories, which might be called real life stories, have been transformed into fiction and deep fakes. Thirdly, the hybridization within the different genres has produced the confusion in evaluating modernist empirical as well as theoretical sciences. Science has lost its credibility. This condition has been recently described as new era of post-truth, post-statistics and post-facts, and I would add to it post-public media. Social networks and private messenger apps have taken over the news and information and have transformed it into a huge echo chambers of global friendship bubbles, producing perfect conditions for massive public opinion manipulations. Fourthly, the Industrial Revolution has advanced the idea of Internet of Things, which brings us to the hybridization of material and digital. It has stopped being a parallel universe, but it has become integral part of the material being already. And fifthly, which is really interesting for design-based disciplines, it is the virtual presence. We know that binocular human vision and awareness of space allows us to sense the surrounding world in a stereoscopic way, which is very often called perspectiva naturalis, compared to the analytical geometrical structures presented on 2D surface as perspectiva artificialis, an image. Today, due to the digital possibilities, and first of all it has been the retina display of iPhones, the difference between natural vision and visible representations on 2D surfaces are gradually disappearing. And digital reality, so far interfaced mostly through 2D screens, can now be introduced in immersive virtual reality devices, bringing forward hybridization of informational and existential. What we see is what we feel, and what we feel is what we see. Sixthly, the development of neurosciences and digital bionics, prosthetics might lead in not so distant future to the direct links between digital and conscious, between digital and brain in a way, if we talk about hardware. Time proposes 2045. Elon Musk's Neuralink in the middle here has been already produced. It's still big, but it already works. And Ray Kurzweil is going to upload himself into the digital network in 2028. This is what he's predicting. And we might say that, yeah, Ray Kurzweil is an old man having in his fantasies, but he's the guy behind Google and Alphabet. He has track record of 90% of visioning the things that are happening today already at the innovation table of Google. So, if we look at these 6 empirical descriptions, plenitude of information, amalgamation of public and private, post-truth, post-statistics, post-facts and post-public media era, hybridization of material and digital, hybridization of informational and existential, and direct links between digital and conscious, we might try to somehow describe them or generalize what is happening. And I would propose that these first 3 and 5th really deal with images. So the images have become the most powerful vehicle of these generalizations. And they are not just images, but I would say they are archetypal images. We don't really know nowadays in the internet what the images mean, because the meaning value of them has grown exponentially. So the archetypal images that come out really are the core elements of the imagospheric condition that is all around us. And if we look at the other ones, 4th, Industrial Revolution, 5th, VR and digital reality, and the digital and conscious, I would say they are scientific. But at the same time, this is not just science. It is science of fantastic developments and unpredictable possibilities. So we can trying to describe this new paradigm say that it is the predominance of archetypal image and it is the predominance of the fantastic and unpredictable science. Okay, how can we see digital reality? It has been said several times now about the screens, but let us be more detailed about it. I was at the Biennale in Venice and made this image, and when I was working with it, my boss Peter Kjær walked past my table and said, "Why, Jüri, why have you photoshopped this actress onto your picture?" I said, no, it's not me, it was there. And it really was there. A building has been transformed into a screen with an image. Of course, this image doesn't move yet, but there is just a moment away where it starts moving and becomes really fascinating moving image. This already has happened on Times Square. And this is probably, or at least was 2 years ago, the biggest screen in the world. And here it is obvious how architecture has become really a screen or a backdrop for screens. This is Times Square when it still used to be architecture, not anymore. This is northern part of Sweden, and to be more precise, it's the architecture school of Umeå University. I was looking at this image. We are clearly approaching it from the south. The shadows are on the northern side, and the closer we go, the better the image becomes, and we can witness it as it is. It took me quite some time to understand that there is something completely wrong with this image. And don't have that much time, so I can't let you guess, but here is what we see. We approach from the south. We look at the image, it has certain foreshortening of the perspective, and suddenly we see behind the building the facade on the northern side. So actually we should be looking at it from this side. But then we see that the perspective system has transformed into reverse perspective. Or the further you go, the bigger it gets. Of course, these are the stitching algorithms of Google when it describes us, the world. But how can we be sure that what we see is what there really is? This is another architecture school. It is KTH in Stockholm. And I was looking at it, and then I was suddenly moving my screen, and I was astonished to see that this image actually changes when I move it on my screen. This goes up, and the proportions of the building are already quite different. So the same as we witnessed before, the objects in digital reality have become amorphous. They are bent, they are stretched, they are twisted. They have certain essence of the reality there, but it is highly transformable and depends on your viewpoint. And then of course if I move my screen again, I can see that the proportions have changed here again. So what we see is not really what there is. We see what we are given to be seen. Here is another trial, and this is Milan, Cathedral of Milan. We look at it from distance. Now we look at it from directly above, and now we look at it from another point of view. And all of these actually are quite right. They work with the perspectiva artificialis and naturalis. This is probably what we can see. What also tells us that the world in different places of the world by the same program is depicted quite differently. So now we come to the final part of our presentation. How can we use digital reality? And here one might say, we can even ask to be more precise, how can we use design in digital reality? This is a fantasy. This is a fantasy of space. It has been described by intuitive drawing. It is in perspectiva artificialis, but I think all of us have some kind of hint that this is a space and something is happening there. It was made before the space was built, because I know it, because it's my drawing. Then it was transformed into another drawing, which is more precise, which is checking the facts in mathematics. It is a full geometrical system, which helps then people to really come together and do something like that, build something like that. And then actually at the end it is there, it's ready. What we might say is that between this initial fantasy of space and between the space itself here for us now is some kind of connection. Some part of this fantasy has really been transformed into the reality. And between these two stages there has been several horizons. I would say design horizon, where it moves from ephemeral fantasy into digitally exact geometrical system, and there is also the horizon of existence, where people come together in practice, take materials, add them together, work together, a huge crowd of people, and at the end it is there. Now, this process really describes us the design phenomena. First of all, we have this fantasy or image of spatial condition. Then, since 600 years, we've been able to describe it on the plans, sections and elevations. If they are exact enough, we know what the image was about, and then it can be manufactured or built. A wedge in this case. This wedge lives in my presentation illegally because I forgot to take the address, so it is there. I don't know where it came from, but it has become reality, and probably this is how it became into the being. So we have the imagination of future space and time, which through several stages becomes a memory of future space. We remember it through the design phase or the design drawings. And then it can be manufactured. So the design drawings or design artifacts in digital sphere are on a certain horizon between the fantasy and the reality. But we can think of it in a different way. There is a wedge there. We want to know about it. We want to make sure we know about it most profoundly and clearly. So we measure it. And this is the horizon of existence that becomes described on design horizon. And then we have the fully understandable and comprehensible image or a fantasy of this implement or space. So we have the memory of the past space and time, and it has been turned into imagination of past space and time. Here is the amphibian stand of design horizon, which can go both ways, which I think is the essence of design-based disciplines. This layer between the mind and matter, this layer between what is happening in design, is the possibility of transforming both the future and the past, if we want to know about it.
And now, at the end of this presentation, we have come to the moment where we should look at the screen, look at the digital screen, and imagine how it is the filter or an interface to the digital reality for all of us. So everything we do today actually is very much influenced by this filter through which we look at the world. And it is mostly the screen through which the digital images come to us. But let us think a little bit further. Even in its most simplistic form, anything we do today with the digital devices is already design work. All the future work, the digital reality, will have a new dimension. And that new dimension is about designing something. As reality is accessed through the digital platform, even if we make a phone call, we dial the numbers, we move the phone, it already changes the whole set of
electric fields, the magnetic fields all around us, which we reform and re-establish. But in more complicated work, of course, we use the digital devices. And all the digital devices become this means of design work. And the further we go into the future, I believe, everything we do on the digital platform actually is a design work. So we must think again and come back, reviewing the possibilities of design thinking and craft thinking. These two become extremely important when digital work is predominantly design. This is what design-based disciplines can give back to the rest of the professions and to all of us when we start working mostly in the digital field. And of course, any digital image we can make nowadays can become a project, design project of its own right. It has a lot of information already today connected to it, where it was made, what kind of lighting, what kind of exposure, who has been making the image. All of these little sets of data become the part of image. But now if we can imagine the artificial intelligence working with the images, these images contain possibly, or they contain virtually, all the information artificial intelligence can really impact in there. Which means that anything we imagine, anything we can describe through digital image can become the reality of its own right. And the knowledge is either revived by the artificial intelligence or collected or imagined by the artificial intelligence. If we look at these two images, which depict a sketch of a building and then a ground plan of a building, we can see that the colored sketch is so much more interesting, so much more dense with information, feeling and emotions than the dead drawing on the right-hand side, black and grey in this case, which is necessary for the final outcome of design and building the building. But nevertheless, the information there is much less than in a drawing that has been done beforehand. So I believe the craft of architecture and other design-based disciplines comes back to us through the craftsmanship of drawing, sculpting and making. These images have much more in them than an ordinary project. So we can imagine that the craft of the future and the design thinking of the future really will be about the complexity of image and how that complexity of image can then be transformed into the reality. But of course, this is a very optimistic point of view. There is a slightly more pessimistic point of view with which I would like to end this presentation. If we look at this image, it is by Hao I Qiang. He was fascinated of doing an old-fashioned photorealistic image. And if previously the craft recommended that we would sketch, draw, paint again, add some new layers to the drawing or painting, then now in the 3D dimensional a build-up of the drawing, it is actually building the whole world again. And here we can see on the right-hand side how this future imaginary world takes place as a project of its own right, as an architectural or design project. Then several layers are added to it, so the desired effects on the surfaces and on the materials will be achieved. And finally, we have the image. We can have hundreds of images, unlimited points of view to that particular space and to these particular objects. But now if we add to it the future powers of artificial intelligence and computer-aided manufacturing, we are facing the possibility that artificial intelligence can really build or print all of these design artifacts as it believes it necessary, or as we recommend from the artificial intelligence. So again, the beautiful craft of the humankind in sketching, drawing, painting and making disappears. That was the presentation of digital, both disturbing and delightful. Thank you all, and I wish you a very good workshop.